I don't think the residents in Aljunied, Hougang for 30 years now, and even Sengkang as a result of the results of the last election, would appreciate being called free riders. They're not free riders. Residents of Aljunied, I can speak more authoritatively for Aljunied residents because I'm a sitting MP there. We're not just doing nothing, having been voted in. We're not just letting the other guy, the government of the day, do something. We've got to do what we have to do. We've got to run the town council, which is why Mr. Lee Kuan Yew conceived of the town councils in the first place, because if you want to move forward in the system as an opposition member of parliament, you've got to prove your worth in the town council. And we've had growing pains. I think I'm not going to deny that. But if we were bungling things up, I wouldn't be here today. My team wouldn't be here today. We've tried our best in the circumstances that we are in. The Sengkang team is not going to have an easy time. First term, it's always going to be tough. But the residents the voters of these constituencies put their faith in us because they know an opposition in parliament is ultimately good for Singapore. And it's not just, and if I can suggest this, it's not just the NCMP version of the opposition. With full respect to everyone who's an NCMP in this parliament and those that came before. But it's when you have elected opposition MPs that the government listens harder. And that means something to people. That's my view. I'm sure people the PAP may have a different view on it. But that's my perspective. And that's why it's so important for there to be elected opposition MPs. The Prime Minister spoke about a dishonest sort of packaging of what I'm suggesting. The bigger moral imperative that I have, and it's a huge burden, and I felt this burden before the last elections, was whether the people who are standing as candidates could follow through. That's the heaviest decision. That's the heaviest burden that I have. And if you choose someone who is not committed, not vested, that's the biggest pain for me as the leader of one party that aspires to represent Singaporeans in Parliament. So I'll have to do what is good and what is right by Singapore. Looking for the best people. Do I want to contest all the seats, more seats, slowly grow? A lot of it turns on the quality of people that come and are attracted by the Workers' Party and our platform. If Singaporeans are attracted to it, then sure, there's a prospect of growth, but it's not growth for growth's sake. I'm not desperate for power, Prime Minister. But we've got to get good people if we want to bring this country forward. The PAP have been doing that, as the Prime Minister has alluded. At this point in our growth, I think we have to grow our roots as a loyal opposition. After more than 50 years of independence, this is the first time the government has recognized the office of the leader of the opposition. We have many, many more miles to go. But we're not chasing a destination. We intend to do right by Singapore.
Prime Minister.
I appreciate Mr. Pritam's explanations. I in no way undervalue his motivations, his passion, his desire to do right by Singapore, his wish to have a high-quality opposition built up in Singapore. I understand that. I think it's good for Singapore that you have honest people in the opposition, people who believe in what they're trying to do, people who will stand up and fight for their ideals, and from time to time disagree very strongly with the government. I think that's entirely reasonable. I think it's also good that you have opposition who take their town council responsibility seriously, who look after their constituencies assiduously, conscientiously, and do their best for their MPs, and give the MPs a reason to vote for them. I think it's entirely reasonable. But what I would say, however, is if you stand and you tell people, vote for me, I will be a better MP than the other one, than the PAP MP. I think that's entirely reasonable. But if you say, vote for me, somebody else will vote for the PAP, and therefore the PAP will be the government. That, the economists will call a free rider. It means that you're taking advantage of somebody else who's doing the duty of electing a government for the nation, and you're not doing your part, expressing your true views and preference as a voter, whom you want to be the next government. And if everybody takes that attitude, then you're going to end up with a government which you don't want. Because the argument which he makes is that he's very careful. He only chooses candidates he can trust to be Workers' Party candidates. I think I give him that. It's the right and responsible attitude to take. But I think other opposition parties may say they have been trying to get good candidates too. And they could make the same argument as you have, that it's good to have an opposition in Singapore. Vote for us. Somebody else will look after the government of Singapore. So supposing that the PSP had been as persuasive as Mr. Pritam Singh, and the SDP had been as persuasive as Mr. Pritam Singh, and more voters had taken such an attitude, where would Singapore be? Is that the right outcome for Singapore? So therefore, something is wrong when you say, I really want one government, but I will vote for another one. And the system will go wrong when you do that. And I think it is necessary that people understand this and understand what is at stake when you elect a government of Singapore. Elections are not just about the town council, they're also about electing the government for the country. And that's necessary for people to bear firmly in mind.